Today, I'm joined by Dr. Bryan Caplan, professor of economics at George Mason University and New York Times bestselling author. He's written books such as The Myth of the Rational Voter, which was named the best political book of the year by the New York Times. Other books include Selfish Reasons to Have More Kids, The Case Against Education, and more recently, Labor Econ versus the World, and Voters Are Mad Scientists. That's his most
Voters as
recent
mad
one.
scientists.
So, yes. How are you doing this morning, Dr. Caplan?
Absolutely great. Let's do it.
All right. First off, for those in my audience who are unfamiliar with you, do you think you could begin by talking a little bit about yourself, your background, and about the kind of work you do?
Sure thing. I'm an economics professor. I got my PhD from Princeton. I've been at George Mason University for 26 years now, half my life. I started off doing fairly normal economics articles, but over time I've tried to branch out to writing books of big ideas. Definitely research-based, but trying to deal with much bigger questions than professors usually work on. Normally, I think about a book for many years, and then I write it, and then I move on to another topic, honestly. So I've got The Myth of the Rational Voter, which is on the economics of government. I've got Selfish Reasons to Have More Kids, which is about human genetics and fertility and parenting. I've got Open Borders, which is about immigration policy and all of its different aspects. Case Against Education, that's about why in the world we get paid a lot of extra money to go sit in a bunch of classes that seem to have nothing to do with anything you're going to do in the real world. And then I've got all those books of essays. So I've been a blogger for about 20 years now. And what I've been doing is publishing my top 5 to 7% of all things that I wrote over the last 20 years and turning that into a series of 8 books.
Okay. So yeah, in your most recent book, Voters as Mad Scientists, you argue against the notion that voters are primarily motivated by self-interest, but instead make their decisions on the basis of their own subjective perceptions of what is moral or what is just. So this is a running theme throughout many of the essays included throughout the book. That said, do you think you could please elaborate on this thesis and explain your reasoning?
Sure. It's very tempting for people to go and say, everyone who disagrees with me is just doing it for the money. All right. Sounds good. But when we look at the data, it just doesn't seem to be true. Income is a very poor predictor of voting behavior, has been so for a very long time. Nowadays, it might even be flipping to the point where Democrats are more likely to be high income. But in any case, it's a case of very low correlation. When researchers have looked at more particular issues, again, it just seems like whether you personally are benefiting from something or affected by it just doesn't matter very much. There's a classic study of mandatory busing, finding that childless whites in states without busing still thought it was terrible. It's like, well, what difference does it make for you? It doesn't affect you, but that's not the way that people think. Instead, they are usually forming their political views either on the basis of ideology, or the other one is about group identity, where there's certain groups that I care about, that I feel like I'm part of, and any attack upon my group is in some sense an attack upon me, even if it's obviously just totally irrelevant to me personally. I mean, you can just see this most recently with the Israeli-Gaza war, where American Jews, it doesn't really matter for them what happens to Israel, but they care about Israel and they're pro-Israel. And then you have a lot of people who are Muslim or Arab who take the other side. And then finally, you've got this ideological left-wing support saying, oh, we have to be in favor of Gaza because they're also like other oppressed groups and we're for all oppressed groups,
basically.
right? Yeah. So again, you put this all together and that's what's really going on. It has so little to do with anything that will personally affect them and almost everything to do with either ideology or group identity.
So one of the essays that stood out to me the most was the one entitled How You Can Find Socialism in a Capitalist World, in which you essentially make the argument that socialism is more or less only functional, or a socialist can only be happy within the context of a free market society. What would you say to someone who might find this assertion to be contradictory, regardless of whether they're a capitalist or a socialist?
Yeah, I don't think I specifically said happy, because I don't think happiness even has that much to do with objective circumstances. Yeah. But in terms of being able to get what you want, I say, yeah, look, if you don't like commercial society, if you don't like capitalism, I mean, your most obvious thing is fine, join a commune. All right. So there's that. I think in the piece, I also just say, hey, if you just don't like having to work for a boss, how about you go and take a job that you don't like for a few years and then live very frugally, save the money, and then move to a low-cost area where you never have to work again. It's just totally doable when you crunch the numbers. It's like, all right, well, let's see. If I'm making $50,000 a year, what do I really need to survive? And like, do you really even need $10,000 to survive? So then you can save up $40,000 a year, do that for 5 years. You got $200,000, and then just move to a really low cost part of the US. And you can then continue your life based upon the interest, never have to go and have a capitalist job again. Or again, you could go and do some compromise where you work at the capitalist job, make money, save it, and then you go and work at a commune where they pay very little, but you're able to still have an okay standard of living because you can supplement that with your savings. So yeah, I mean, on the other hand, you flip it around, and then people in actual socialist countries, they're generally just too poor to sit around saying, oh, isn't it so great to be under socialism? But yeah, the main thing is it's just not that hard if you are motivated to live a socialist lifestyle in a capitalist world. I'm well aware hardly anybody does this, but doesn't. But to me, it just shows, well, it doesn't seem like you actually want it that much.
Yeah, that's something I've always kind of argued with like other libertarians about too. They're like, oh yeah, no, communism or whatever, that's 100% never going to work. And then I say, it could work within the context of like an anarcho-capitalist society, like some kind of covenant community, as that's like one of the arguments, or a commune that can voluntarily form together. This is like something like
sure could work. Although what we see from the existing semi-capitalist societies, there's just almost no demand. There's almost no one who cares about socialism enough to actually live in a commune, or even to go and just live really frugally, save money, and then just opt out of the system. Mostly this stuff is lip service. It's a dream, but to actually do anything about it, not much. And of course, we could see this during the Cold War too. Most obviously, if you were a West German communist, it's like, there's the door over there. You don't have to learn a new language. Just move over to East Germany if you like it so much. Virtually zero. I mean, something like approximately zero people took that deal, a few. But on the other hand, we saw something like 20% of the population of East Germany got the hell out when it was still possible to do so. So I think that's just reflective of a more general issue, which is that so much of politics is lip service to ideals that sound really good, but people don't actually, in fact, care about them enough to try to live them.
So one of your more controversial positions is your support for open borders, which you've been very vocal about in your writings and other interviews. The case for which you present in your 2019 book, Open Borders, The Science and Ethics of Immigration. So in the book and in the class that you teach on the subject of immigration, you argue that unrestricted immigration would be a net positive insofar as global economic prosperity is concerned.
Not just a net positive, the very biggest net positive anyone's ever found.
So there are many people in my audience who I'd imagine, would probably be skeptical or critical of that perspective. What might you say to convince them of your position?
Well, here's where I would start. Just take a look at what happens when even a very unskilled immigrant shows up in the US and gets a job. All right. So you have someone who's shining shoes on the streets of Port-au-Prince, Haiti. They arrive in Miami, do the same job. And what happens? The answer is they're making 10 times as much money. Right? This is not speculation. This is not ideology. It's just hard fact. That's why they want to come, is you can move from a very poor country to a very rich country and suddenly make vastly more money. Now, how is this possible? All right. One story could be US employers are nice and Haitian employers are mean, but that's a pretty weird economic account of the world. The story that makes a lot more sense is that people's productivity in rich countries is much higher than productivity in poor countries. Just imagine what you would be able to accomplish in Haiti. And again, this is something where we don't have to speculate. We don't have to appeal to philosophy. We can just look at numbers and say, hey, the same farmer in Mexico produces a lot more food in the US. The same person who works at a factory in Colombia produces a lot more in a factory in the US. The one case I will admit is puzzling is the shoe shining, the services. How are you more productive when it seems like you're just doing the same job? And the answer there is that economically, the point of a service is to save time. and when of the time of the customer specifically. And when you save the time of a person whose wage is higher, you are saving more valuable time. And that's the sense in which your productivity is higher. All right. So all of this just adds up to there's this undeniable, overwhelming benefit for the individual. And then the real question comes down to, can we scale this? Can we scale this? It's just obvious that we can go and make one person's life vastly better by stamping their passport or stamping their work visa. And furthermore, this is not at the expense of anyone else. Rather, it is part of them contributing a lot more to the world than they were contributing before. Mexican farmer grows a lot more food in the US than he did back in Mexico. He is producing a lot more because he has moved. So the real question just comes down to scalability. Now, I think that once you put it that way, think that it just immediately becomes at least a harder question and harder for someone to say, no, this is crazy. It's not crazy. The only question is, how many can we let in? Can we let in one? Yeah, we can totally let in one. Can we let in 10? Yeah, we can let in 10. 100, yes. 1,000, yes. 10,000, yes. 100,000, yes. 1,000,000. Sure seems like it. We've let in millions. And then it's just, can we do 10 million? Can we do 50 million, 100 million? The main thing that I would say here, although of course in the book I go into a lot more detail, is that if you just say we can't add 100 million people to the US and expect things to keep going the way that they're going right now, I'll just say, well, do you know what the population of the US was when it started? It was about 3 million. It's about 1% of what we are. We've already multiplied our population by a factor of 100. Why can't we double it again? Why can't we?
There's a little something called the Midwest too.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, why can't we multiply it another 10 times? And you say, well, could we do it 1,000,000 times? Like, probably not 1,000,000 times. We don't even have the people right now. But still, like the idea that we have just hit the point where we can't do again what we have done so many times over seems awfully dogmatic to me. Again, I'm happy to go into a lot more details about the specific complaints and see how well those hold up.
So what would you say in response to somebody who make the argument, or well, there are three arguments in particular that are major. One of them is, and I think you and I both know the answer to this one,
Yeah.
but it's going to hurt American jobs. And then there's also, it's going to dilute our culture. And then you have the other one, which is it's going to make democracy unworkable because you have these different worldviews. So,
right. Yeah. So on taking away American jobs, this is one where you kind of do need to go back to intro econ and just say, well, look, the secret of mass consumption is mass production. There is not a fixed number of jobs. The US economy was able to easily absorb many tens of millions of additional women. And it was a good thing because you take people whose skills were not being used, and then the economy transforms that raw talent into production. The best way of thinking about it is this. All progress hurts someone. There's no such thing as progress that doesn't have some losers. Vaccines, they are bad for morticians. But the best way of thinking about this is always to step back and say, what is the total effect on total production? And here again, we can just clearly see that when you move people from poor countries to rich countries, the production of humanity goes up. Right? So, and that's the key thing for understanding living standards is just what is the total amount of production that is going on for humanity. Is it possible for immigration to hurt some people? Yeah, of course, because all progress hurts some people. Like I said, I would be better off if we had kept out all the foreign economics professors, better off materially. A bunch of them are my friends, so I don't think I'd be better off on net, but materially, clearly, I could be in a much higher ranked school if we would just go and stop this flood of foreign economic professorial talent from coming in. But that is not a good way to think about how to make an economy and how to make a world more prosperous. Then you were mentioning the cultural effects. So again, one where you just got to go through each item and say, well, is it really true that immigrants don't learn English? And the answer is, well, adult first-generation immigrants rarely become fluent. True today, has always been true. On the other hand, their kids almost always become fluent. If you're thinking about things like, if your parents are illiterate goat herders, will you be an illiterate goat herder too? Here, while of course there is always a pattern where the children of less educated parents tend to become less educated, grow to be less educated themselves, still what we see in the data is there's a lot more upward mobility for immigrants than for natives, which again gives us an idea about how a lot of low education in poor countries comes down to deprivation, lack of opportunity. Within rich countries, I think that it's not rarely about that. It's much more about lack of intellectual ability and motivation. But if you just grow up in a really poor country and you don't have a high school degree, it's quite likely that's not because you lacked intelligence and motivation. It's because opportunities are really crummy in poor countries. We could go over a lot of other measures of culture too. That's what I do in the book. And then finally on workability democracy, it's one where you've just got to go and look at the data. There's a lot of people just say immigrants have terrible political views without even looking at the data. I have looked at the data, and what I'll say is the typical political views of immigrants aren't terrible. I think they are marginally worse than those of people that are already in the US. But it's important to remember that the political views of people already here are quite bad already. And the views of the immigrants, they're marginally worse. So don't make a mountain out of if not a molehill, don't make a mountain out of a sledding hill anyway. And this is one where, I think I at least should get some credit for candor. My editor said, "Oh, don't put this stuff in the book because it undermines your case." And I said, "Look, the book is not about making a case. It's about figuring out the truth." I've got some other stories about the net effect of immigration on politics. Especially in Scandinavia, there are quite a few researchers who are worried that immigration is undermining national solidarity and thereby undermining the welfare state, which is pretty much the opposite of the worry that most people who are anti-immigration in the US have. I think that the Scandinavian research overall makes sense, right? And it's true that a lot of the welfare state depends upon the ideology of we are one united national family. And when you undermine that, then you undermine the welfare state. If you like the welfare state, that's attention. If you think it's already out of control, then let's let in some more immigrants in order to further undermine the sense that we all owe each other a living.
So this sort of relates back to the second part of the question where we were talking about the cultural aspect.
Mm-hmm.
But do you believe that it's possible that?
Yes.
Do you believe that?
Any question that begins with "Is it possible?" Then I'm going to say, "Yeah, it's possible." I don't
do you believe that unrestricted immigration and unlimited free movement is universally beneficial, or does it maybe only work within the context of certain countries and cultures? For example. Yeah. Countries like the United States, where identity is rooted in things like individualism and more abstract values, compared to Europe, which consists of like actual nations with deeper ethnic roots. Do you think that there are certain immigration policies that might be to the benefit of one country, but perhaps harmful to another? And why or why not?
Yeah. So what I say is I think it's almost always better. The main counterexamples are ones where immigration is going to give you civil war. And there are a few examples like that. Right now, everyone's thinking about Israel and Palestine. I'm not someone who says I stand with Israel. Israel does a lot of bad things, but I think it's just true that you would have civil war if they had open borders with Palestine. And why would think so? Well, there was almost a civil war in Jordan because of Palestinian immigration, and then there was a civil war in Lebanon where Palestinian immigration played a major role. So there are a few cases like this. I think they're really rare, but it is logically possible. Europe, again, I think that this whole idea that they just can't do it because they're so ethno-nationalist, I don't even think they're all that different from us. They definitely don't seem to have much problem with having open borders within the European Union. There are more tensions when you're letting in non-European immigrants, but that's just what they are. They're tensions, which then people dramatize and exaggerate in order to go and whip people up into hysteria. Like when you hear about the no-go zones of Europe due to Muslim immigration, let's go there and see that they're not no-go zones. That's just made up. Do they have higher crime rates than other places in Europe that don't have Muslim immigration? They do, but I'd way rather go to Malmö in Sweden than walk around Baltimore outside of the harbor. So just keep it all in perspective. I mean, so many complaints about immigration. Actually, when I hear them, I'm like, there's a little bit of truth to what you're saying, but stay calm. In the real world, even the very best policies have a bunch of drawbacks, and it's important to put numbers on them rather than just say, see, look at this headline. That disproves everything you're saying. No. Headlines are dramatic events picked out of a vast world which show pretty much nothing normally.
So, as somebody who does support free movement, you've also been highly critical of nationalism, both as a concept and in
Mhm.
practice.
Mhm.
And in turn, if I remember correctly, the advent of nationalism is one of your key criticisms of movements such as the French Revolution,
Mhm.
which, as we know, has its intellectual roots in the French Enlightenment, particularly the writings of authors like Jean-Jacques Rousseau.
Hmm.
Now, recalling a private conversation that you and I had about a year ago, you mentioned to me that you believe Rousseau to be the godfather of not only socialism, but also fascism and National
Mhm.
Socialism.
Mhm.
This isn't a connection that many typically make. So, did you think you could please explain this
Sure.
connection and more broadly why the writings of Rousseau were so dangerous?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think my view actually is that uncommon. I think there's a lot of people who agree with me here who do intellectual history. Um, so what I mean, first, just to step back, I don't consider Rousseau to even be a true French Enlightenment thinker. I think he is a French thinker, or well, of course he's Swiss, but Francophone thinker who happened to be writing during the French Enlightenment. But I think the main thing that he was doing was critiquing the French Enlightenment. I
In
see
that
him as an
way.
anti-Enlightenment thinker, someone who was hearing what who heard what they had to say and basically said like, no, no. All right, so that's my take on Rousseau, and that's how he was interpreted at the time. His two discourses were generally seen as being attacks upon what other people at the time are doing. So against what someone like Voltaire or Diderot were doing. Uh, Definitely attacks on what someone like Smith or Hume would be doing. Again, people today will often say, well, the French Enlightenment versus Scottish Enlightenment. Again, they were like Voltaire and was very connected. Diderot was very connected to all of this. In terms of what's going on, well, you've got a number of ideas in Rousseau that really do play out in the French Revolution. So you have this idea of the general will. So this glorification of, first of all, like democracy, whatever it is that people think this is going to be great, combined with this weird supplement of there's going to be some intellectuals who will be the interpreters of the general will. That's worked in too. So he sort of combines this glorification of unrestricted democracy with this idea of there being what Lenin would call a vanguard party at the top who is interpreting, well, what the people really mean is this. So that's something that we definitely saw in the French Revolution was, the one hand, the glorification of direct democracy. On the other hand, especially unrestricted democracy. On the other hand, turning into a brutal dictatorship. As to what's really going on there, well, there's a lot of doublethink, obviously, but that's a big part of Rousseau's thinking. Also in Rousseau, you just have very little appreciation of economic growth, commercial economy. Instead, there's a lot of looking back to the glory of Sparta, really just having a total society where people are thinking about not personal prosperity or economic progress, but they're thinking about politics all the time.
He almost has like a Hesiod kind of like view about the golden age, like almost like a
Yeah.
decline from the golden age. So yeah.
Yeah. So there's that. Now, I would say that in the case of the French Revolution, Rousseau's influence is very clear and direct. It's not quite as direct as it was for Marx and the Soviet Union or something like that, but still, you will have members of the ruling group of the later stage of the French Revolution holding up Rousseau's social contract as a replacement Bible, that kind of thing. In later periods, I'll say, Rousseau goes and influences some other thinkers who go and influence other people. I would say it's a lot less clear that Rousseau actually personally, say, ever influenced Hitler. No, I don't know of any sign that Hitler even read Rousseau. If you say, well, Hitler read a guy who read Rousseau, all right, fine. But then it's getting to be a lot more speculative. The French Revolution itself, I know there's a lot of people who want to make excuses for it, but bottom line, Europe was laid waste for 25 years. There's just no getting around that, right? And people say, well, but out of the ashes came some great stuff. It's like, you know what? I think we should be really supportive of changes that don't start with ashes. Yeah. I mean, like you're not going to say like out of the ashes of the Industrial Revolution. No, the Industrial Revolution takes the best stuff people have and they improve it. They don't say, let's have 25 years of ashes. So yeah, anytime someone has something good to say about a giant bloodbath, it's like, yeah, you think we could have avoided the bloodbath? I think we could have avoided the bloodbath. just don't think it's that hard to avoid bloodbaths. It's the kind of thing where you have to really work hard to get a bloodbath. And then once you let slip the dogs of war, once you unleash terror upon the world, then it spirals out of control. Many like people say, oh, well, we got the Napoleonic Code. Wasn't that great? It's like, would have been way better to have just peacefully reformed the French monarchy and then just let it go from there. Or you know what else would have been better? Not reforming the French monarchy. That would have been a lot better too. Just like if you can only reform with fire and blood, wait until things are more stable and then do your reforms.
Over the summer, I had the pleasure of having Yaron Brook on for an interview. And during the interview, so I know you guys generally agree with several I know you guys were both influenced initially, at least in your case, by Ayn Rand. I know you both advocate for secularism. However, the one issue you guys disagree on is the anarchism versus minarchism issue. And so I asked him why he believes why minarchism and classical liberalism are preferable to anarchism when it comes to structuring, quote unquote, structuring a libertarian society. This was the subject of a Soho Forum debate that the two of you had back this previous September. So in the same spirit, what is your case for anarchism? What about minarchism specifically do you take issue with? And why is anarcho-capitalism a better model upon which to, again, quote unquote, structure a libertarian society?
Right. All right. So, I mean, I would never just say anarchism, which means so many things and normally just means chaos. There is this technical term of anarcho-capitalism, which I did defend in the debate. It's the kind of thing where, honestly, you have to first be an almost total libertarian and in order to see any remote plausibility to anarcho-capitalism. So that's where I would start. I mean, in a way, I think that the minarchism, anarcho-capitalism debate is the only sensible debate to have, like anarcho-capitalism versus democracy. It's like, well, there just isn't enough common ground even to understand the anarcho-capitalist position. But so it's best just to back up and think about, so minarchism, what is it? Brooke doesn't like that word, but it's the only descriptive word. All his other term is limited government, which could mean almost anything. But anyway, the idea of minarchism is that you have a government that is limited to the following things: first, police; second of all, courts; third of all, law; and then national defense you can add on if you've got more than one country. All right. So now if you can imagine a government so small, that's all it does. All it does is police, courts, law, national defense. All right. So, and if you think that would be good, and of course, these are all big ifs. Most people don't think that, but Yaron Brook does think that. Right. So say, all right, let's accept that as our starting point. If you don't accept that, then there's not really that much point in having the conversation. But if you accept that as the starting point, accept that it's not only possible, but would be really good, then there are a series of questions that I asked in the debate. All right, here's one question. Is it possible to have more than one minarchist country? Is it possible to have more than one minarchist country? I actually didn't know what Yaron was going to say. I kind of expect him to say, no, we got to have world minarchist government, or else all of these worries that I have about society breaking down into war between rival gangs will be true. But he said, no, of course you can have multiple countries. All right. So in that case, I'll say, like, one common version of anarcho-capitalism is precisely just that we basically have companies or other groups have a homeowners association, and their homeowners association provides these goods, and otherwise nothing changes. Right. And I said specifically, could we have a lot of really small countries? He's like, yeah, we could have a lot of really small countries. So I said, in that case, you really don't have any argument against one version of anarcho-capitalism, which is just that you have a bunch of homeowners associations all coexisting. Now, question is, how, in what sense would that be better? So if you are a minarchist, or if you are a libertarian in general, then you're going to put at least some moral weight on the importance of unanimous consent. And this is something that you can get with a homeowners association, but you'd never get with a government. So that's just so any government basically winds up at most pretending to have consent, but no government actually has consent, because remember, in a real contract, if half the people that are taking part agree, or 51% agreed to take part in it, and the other 49 have to go along with it, what do we call that? It's not a contract, that's slavery. So you've got, like, in real contracts, it's unanimous consent. 100% of people that are participating agree to do it. But actual governments never have that because it's just too hard to get unanimity at the level of a nation. Right now, in terms of what's improved by this, I mean, one thing that I say is improved is just that you no longer have to sit around hoping that the political system doesn't go and devolve back into a larger government, because that seems to be the normal pattern. That when people, if you've got a democratic government, even if you happen to go and have minarchy at one point, it's not likely that it's going to remain. There's going to be some demagogue who will come along sooner or later and re-expand the government. And then also, if you just believe in the benefits of free competition, reputation, that these are a better protection of consumers' interests than voting, which, again, if you believe in minarchy, you almost have to believe, then again, that is an advantage. Now, the last part of the debate comes down to, all right, if you agree that we could have this one version of anarcho-capitalism where we just have lots of small countries, how about one where instead of defining jurisdiction geographically, we do it contractually? We already have this with things like insurance companies. We have insurance companies that sell insurance to people in the same geographical area, but when one person gets in an accident, when a customer of one company gets in an accident with a customer of another company, the companies definitely don't go and start shooting each other. And normally they don't even go to court, even though they legally could. Normally, instead, they have worked out by contract a way to resolve disputes cheaply in advance. And that is the broader version of anarcho-capitalism, where instead of defining these small countries in terms of their geography, we define them in terms of a contract, right? And again, I'll say that conceptually, these are basically the same thing. So I think the case for both is the same, and the arguments against are the same. I mean, like I said at the beginning of that debate, I'm just starting off with the assumption that you agree that the combination of private property, free competition, and reputation gives very good results. If you don't believe that, then none of these arguments will make any sense.
So do you believe that? So this is something I asked Walter Block the first time I interviewed him, because like I kind of like playing the devil's advocate at times. So in the absence of a state, what would prevent a state from more or less forming? I know that's the same argument you made in terms of minarchism. What would stop the state from growing?
In the presence of a state, what prevents a state from forming? But again, like, the answer is private property plus free competition plus reputation. So if there is one particular supplier of defense services that starts to mistreat others, you go and pick up your phone and you call a competitor and say, hey, they're doing something bad. I want to go and have you protect me. Right? That's the general idea. I mean, you could say, what would stop an auto insurance company from litigating every single accident? Nothing legally, but it's just terrible business, because you'll have enormous legal bills, and it is just a much better business model to pre-negotiate and work things out amicably than to go and shed blood. Now you may say, well, doesn't that predict that the whole world would be peaceful? And the answer, what I explain is, look, a lot of this depends upon what equilibrium you're in. If you're in a dog-eat-dog world, then trying to go and approach people and say, can we work this out amicably? You might just get shot. They might even kill the messenger. The beginning of the movie / graphic novel 300, where the Persian ambassador shows up and he says, earth and water, that's all we want. And then it's clear Leonidas is just going to go and kill him. And he says, fool, no one kills a messenger. And then we have the classic, this is Sparta, and he just kills them. All right, so you can have a world like that. That is an equilibrium. But right now, no one was worried that when she came to the U.S. that we would just grab him and hold him hostage. And like, why not? Yeah, in a world where nobody else is doing that, to be the one person one country that does that marks you for a horrible fate. So you don't want to do that.
Yeah, imagine if
the way that I explain it in. Pardon?
If Biden did that to Xi Jinping when he visited San Francisco the other day.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. You could just go and grab him and say, hey, we won't give your leader back unless you sign a peace treaty with Taiwan. We'll send him back in pieces. You could, right? But not likely to work out well at all for the United States to try something like that. Now, what I explained in the debate is that we already know that there are many ideas for reforms that just depend upon there already being some acceptance of the legitimacy of it. So I have this thought experiment. Imagine going to Sweden in the year 1000, or I think it said 1200 because I checked the dates, and just said, how about we have a democracy where we just vote on who will be the ruler, and whoever gets the most of votes gets to win. And like the Vikings would just laugh in your face, and they would say, what's going to happen? If the most powerful guy doesn't get the most votes, he'll just murder the winner and take over, right? Which is a totally reasonable prediction in the Viking era of Sweden. On the other hand, if the current government of Sweden just said, hey, let's cancel the election because we might not win, that would not lead the election to be canceled. It would lead the proposer to be kicked out of the government or maybe put in a mental hospital, right? And what's the difference? The difference is when something is generally accepted as normal in society, then it has extra stability. When it's accepted as weird, then you just seem crazy for supporting it. So I say the same thing in a established anarcho-capitalist society. If there was a CEO who said, let's just start war, let's start murdering our opponents, it's not even that you would have to pick up your phone to go and protect yourself. It's the other people in the company would just say, is this a joke or are you crazy? And let's just get rid of this lunatic. So I think that's the best way of thinking about it. Now, again, you say, well, how do we get from here to there? It's really hard. How do you get from 1200 Sweden to modern Sweden? Also really hard, but we know it can happen. It's not, and it's happened many times. There's a gradual spread of more enlightened attitudes, greater revulsion of violence, probably a lot of the stuff from Pinker's Enlightenment now, and eventually you ascend to a higher level of social interaction without going and needing to have any kind of utopian ideas about how everyone will be nice to everyone, which is silly.
Yeah, it was your Sweden analogy. It reminded me of the one good scene from the last episode of Game of Thrones, where it was the larger guy. He was like, "Oh, how about we make it so that everybody has a vote?" And then like all the lords just start laughing. So
Sam Tarley.
Yeah.
And then the other guy says, yes, why don't we give a vote to my horse?
Yeah. It's like, what's next? Women too? So
yeah. Of course, they're used to queens in Game of Thrones anyway, but yes, interesting feature of this pre-modern era that women have almost no role in politics except at the very top, where every now and then they're the absolute dictator. Interesting.
So moreover, like, so the last question on this bit, in what ways would your arguments, from a purely argumentational perspective, because I know I don't want to put words in your mouth, I think you'd probably be considered more of a consequentialist. Mm-hmm. But in what ways does your argument differ from other anarcho-capitalist thinkers like Murray Rothbard or Walter Block?
Yeah. Well, so the main thing, I would not call myself a consequentialist. My favorite book here is Mike Humer's The Problem of Political Authority. What I will say is consequences matter. If sticking to a norm is going to lead to disaster, then I think that you should break the norm. If you need to steal a dime to save the world, steal the dime, right? But on the other hand, if you've got to murder one person to go and save 5 patients who need organ transplants, no. So that is where I'm coming from philosophically. In terms of Murray Rothbard or David Friedman, I would say in both cases, they make a lot of good points. A lot of these arguments I'm getting from them, I think both of them downplay just this importance of expectational equilibria. I think I am basically the originator of this point about how democracy wouldn't have worked in Sweden in 1200, but works fine now. The idea that when a lot of the stability of a system just depends upon it being accepted as legitimate. I don't think they denied it. They just didn't emphasize it. Rothbard, he does often talk as if like consequences don't matter, although he said, but they will be really good, but they don't matter. But they'll be really great, but they don't matter. All right. So there's some of that. And then Rothbard also has some totally bizarre, nonsensical, wishful thinking. Probably his most egregious example is where he says, well, what if after a big anarcho-capitalist revolution, then a state reemerges? He says, well, then we'll just be back to where we started. We'll be no worse off than we are before. So why not give it a try? And it's just like, are you out of your mind? You're talking about a massive civil war and then just hoping things work out. It's like, look, things can be a lot worse if you end up where you started, right? It's, there was this old joke about how communism is the longest route between capitalism and capitalism. Yeah, it's like, gee, well, no problem with trying Marxism, Leninism. If it fails, then we'll just end up back at something back at capitalism. It's like, yeah, after 70 years of tyranny and 20 million dead bodies. Great. So there's that kind of nonsense. David Friedman is quite a bit better on avoiding total nonsense. He's got a really good chapter in The Machinery of Freedom called Revolution is the Hell of It that I fully endorse. Yes, I'm about as anti-violent revolution as a person can be. I think it's, violent revolution might be a good way to go and establish tyranny. It's not a good way to get liberty.
So this is kind of more of a tongue-in-cheek question, but what do you think the best way to solve this really, really, I don't know, because there's that old phrase, it's if you get two libertarians in a room, they're going to have three different opinions.
Yep. Uh-huh.
And it seems like you have more the quote-unquote minarchists, you have the classical liberals, you have like the paleo-libertarians and the ANCAPs, and they're like all fighting each other. I think this was especially after the sort of collapse of the Ron Paul movement back in like the early to mid 2010s. But what do you see going forward, the best route for unity and just stopping all this stupid quabbling?
Let's see. So in the next book that I'm putting out, there's an essay that I wrote 30 years ago called Purges and Schisms. And it really comes down to, you got to be the change that you want to see in the world. Stop getting angry at other people. I mean, I'd recommend stop getting angry at anybody, but definitely stop getting angry at people where the difference between you two is very slight. Like always be friendly to people, be an ambassador for your view. It might hurt, but it's what you would do if you actually cared about the ideas being more successful. So there's that. And especially if the person is not that far from you, say like turn the other cheek, don't get angry, return cruelty, return kindness for cruelty. Like that's what you do if you actually want to improve things. There's this idea of no, like that gives a bad incentive. We have to go and crush the people who are being bad. It's like, yeah, the people who are being bad don't think they're being bad. They think you're being bad. So that's, it's just a lot better to keep extending the hand of friendship, try to go and understand where people are coming from, try to have do a positive take. And again, this doesn't mean don't disagree with other people that are close to you or try to improve the arguments, but always do it in that light of, look, I agree with this conclusion. This argument, however, is incorrect. Here's the better argument. I love you guys, but you're making a mistake. That is what you do if you want to get more unity. Honestly, like I think this is all pretty obvious. There is this main issue that libertarians are drawn from a highly nonconformist group, and as nonconformists, they just have trouble getting along. That's sort of built in, but you can improve things a lot. The main point is you can improve yourself dramatically starting now. Proving other people's hard. So focus on yourself.
So final question, has Marvel become too woke and why?
Yes, of course, Marvel has become way too woke and it's just terrible. So, here's what I will say. I am happy to watch 5 movies from any philosophical or political perspective. But if you want me to watch the 6th movie, no. If your political view is stupid, I'm just done. So I'd watch 5 North Korean movies. It's like, all right, let's show me the 5 best North Korean movies. I will tolerate that. But there is a point where you are so preachy and your views are just so stupid. And I don't use that word lightly. Honestly, think that's what people consider your stereotypical woke views. They're just stupid. It's not some complicated story. There's people say, well, it's considered the most sophisticated view. Yeah, that's held by like 5 people. Who cares? Let's talk about the normal one that people are pushing. So, the lowest level of wokeism is where you just go and miscast, which is, on the one hand, it's the least philosophical, but it's just the one where it's just very distracting from the point of view of the audience. I'm someone who is very open-minded about casting, but still, when you get a philosophy of we must make our cast diverse, that means that you're putting something above the actual fit between the actor and the role, which then gives you a worse product, often a much worse product.
I did an entire 40-minute video on the Cleopatra Netflix thing, if you remember that from 6 months ago. So Yeah, I know exactly. I'm sorry to interrupt you. It was just that just made me laugh.
Yeah. So, Brie Larson from Captain Marvel, she's a fantastic actress. If you just see her in Room, she's great. She's not a superhero. I just like look at her and I just want to laugh the whole time. Gal Gadot, she's a superhero. All right. So, but here's the thing, like getting women that are really credible superheroes, it's just hard. And look, it's not my fault. It's just the truth about the dramatic reality and the pool of talent. And if you just say we've got to have a pile of female superheroes, then you're going to get some that you cast that are just mismatched the role and the movie is bad. Then obviously you've got the next higher level where you actually have the characters preaching at the audience. And that's why I generally find very tiresome. Like I could take 5 movies like this. I was just thinking yesterday, what's the list of the very best woke movies ever made? And I'm not going to just cop out and say, no, they're all terrible. So like Promising Young Woman, that's actually a good movie, for example. All right. But like it's hard when you have a philosophy that you want to hit people over the head with. It makes it harder to do compelling art. It takes special skill and talent to pull it off. And what's been going on in Marvel movies is that they are so committed to the ideology that they're just telling a crummy story that is just tiresome to watch. I guess probably the one that people talk about as being the most explicitly woke is She-Hulk, where you can just see in their advertising where they're going like, we're going to go and make fun of incels in our advertising.
It just looked silly. Like, yes. I didn't even bother watching it.
Yes. So like, I mean, honestly, just as a shareholder, I'm almost sure I've got some Disney shares. Anytime you're going out of your way to lose customers, that is a breach of fiduciary duty. This reminds me, one of the main things that I've been pushing on people who are mad about woke capital is we've got to bring back hostile takeovers. There really was a period 100 years ago where anyone who wanted to go and take over a company would just buy 51% of the shares, walk into the meeting and say, you're all fired. Right nowadays, that is super hard to do. There's a bunch of regulations that make that nearly impossible, which is why even Twitter, that wasn't a hostile takeover. That was a friendly takeover where you have to get existing management on board for the deal. A hostile takeover, you don't need them on. You don't need existing management on board for the deal. The whole idea is that you don't like existing management. You think they're running the company into the ground, so you buy it the stock and get rid of them. Again, you might say, well, why don't we just get a non-woke version of Disney? Thing is that Disney has so much great capital in its archives. They're sitting on a giant stockpile. So they would have to be way worse to actually drive the company into bankruptcy. But the hostile takeover is a way that you can salvage a company that's being mismanaged without it needing to go into total disaster bankruptcy. If you're wondering what are these laws, I got a blog post on this. So you just go to bed on it and put in hostile takeovers. You can go and get the details of the progression of regulation. But a lot, basically there were some regulations put in the 60s, but then there's another pile in the 80s, which pretty much killed the hostile takeover. And if you are worried about woke capital, don't complain about capital, complain about regulation. There's plenty of people that would love to go and take over Disney and fire the crummy people that are wasting shareholder money for their stupid philosophy and then go and bring back the entertainment.
Is there anything that you're working on right now that you want to share with the audience? Any books or writings coming up?
So I've got 3 projects, 3 books that are in the pipeline right now. So coming out very soon is my next book of essays. It's called You Will Not Stampede Me, Essays on Nonconformism. If you are a nonconformist and you've been frustrated by how difficult it is to succeed as a nonconformist, a lot of what the book is about saying, look, nonconformists, if they are strategic about it, can and often do extremely well. All right, the next book that's coming out is, I've got another nonfiction graphic novel, which will be released in April. That is Build Baby Build, The Science and Ethics of Housing Regulation. And then the project that I'm actually working on today, I'm in the middle of it, is a new University Press type book called Unbeatable, The Brutally Honest Case for Free Markets. This book, I claim to be doing something that sounds almost impossible to believe, but I'm going to stick my neck out and say it. I've got a new argument for markets versus government. Got something new to say about that. You might think that the whole field is just totally exhausted, but the new idea comes down to this slogan. Markets do the good things that sound bad. Governments do the bad things that sound good. There's a psychological concept called social desirability bias. I've been pushing it for about a decade on my blog. And this is the book where I go and take this idea and try to recraft the most intellectually solid case for free markets and against government that can exist. At the same time, I'm also going to say, by the way, this won't win a lot of converts because it's really too good for people. It's too honest. It just cuts through all the lies. And yet, part of what's so dysfunctional about politics is that you almost have to lie in order to get anywhere. So this is not the book that I think is going to actually win the debate. It's the argument that is going to say, this is why we ought to win the debate. Now figure out how to really do it in this horrible, corrupt world.
Thank you so much for taking the time to come on today, Dr. Caplan. And remember, everybody, Voters as Mad Scientists, out now.
All these books of essays are Amazon exclusives because they're published through Amazon. But yeah, like anything that I do, everything that I do, you can get on Amazon. And then I've also got my Substack, which is Bet On It.
Okay. And I will be sure to put the links below in the show notes.
All
Again,
right.
thank you so much for coming on, Dr. Caplan. Happy holidays.
All right. You too. All right. Have a great time.